Hey, welcome to the Making Noise podcast. My name is Adam Kana. I'm the host. We are here at episode 20. Kind of losing my mind. It didn't even cross or go through my brain at all. It didn't cross my mind at all that we're this far in. So excited. And it's really cool because the guest today is Doug Bielmeier. And Doug is just such a fun, exciting person to talk to. Very laid back. And you'll see it in this conversation. The evidence is all there. But Doug runs a podcast called The Process, a podcast about music and creativity. And he interviews different composers and music creators specifically about their process, how they create music, what they think about. He shows examples of their music and how they got to that point. It's a great podcast. He had Alan Tyson on there and Lisa Nair. If you've been following the Making Noise podcast, then you know who they are. And so yeah, we talk about that in this episode. We talk about his work as an electroacoustic composer. This technique he uses, he calls windowing, which is an interesting conversation. We talk about the D major chord a lot. We talk about all kinds of different things. Our experience living in Bowling Green. We both went to Bowling Green for graduate school at different times. So yeah, I think this will be a really great episode, and I hope you enjoy it. But I think that's about it. So as always, please like, subscribe, follow on all platforms. If the podcast isn't on a platform that you'd like it on, please contact me. I will gladly put it there. And I believe that's all. So let's make some noise. My name is Adam Kana, and I am a collaborative composer. Join me in the search for a career in classical music. This is the Making Noise podcast.
After hearing your voice on the podcast, I feel I have this like weird, like I've already met you.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. Yeah, I know. I get the same exact thing. It's always interesting kind of having that experience with someone who you've only seen through social media or,
Yeah, and you even know their like speech pattern and like the gait of how they're gonna, I know they're gonna ask that question because they normally do it. Yeah, it's weird. I feel like if I ever met Mark Maron, it would be that way, just because I've listened to his podcast for so long that I would probably just start having, hey, remember that one time 8 years ago when you had that guest on? That was really interesting. Like, let's talk more about that. And you'd be like, do you want an autograph or can I get back to eat? Or
Yeah. Oh, that's so. Yeah, Mark Maron is one of those people too, because he just he's one, like you said, that he'll just his speech patterns.
Yeah.
And I get that a lot too with like Joe Rogan or who's another one. Yeah, I can't think of any others, but
right.
Yeah, that's funny though.
Yeah.
It's
weird.
weird.
In college, my roommate would listen to Howard Stern, and he would wake up in the morning to Howard Stern, and this was like freshman year in college. So I just remember like waking up for 6 months to like the sound of Howard Stern and Robin just like saying the most horrible things, because the show is just like the topics are always just shock and awe. But
especially the original, in like the 90s when he went, because was it the 90s when he went to video?
I think this was before Sirius. Yeah, like before he went to Sirius, because this would have been, showing my age, but this would have been like late 90s. And it was still, I think or maybe it was Sirius at that point. I don't know.
I remember that one guy who was on it, like, was his name Beetle something? Like, he was the black dude with the messed up teeth, and he was like really short.
That's right.
And I want to say so there was
Robin, and then there was like, was there Baba Booey or something? There was just like all these like, people. And that's mixing with the show Jackass for some reason. I just have like all this horrible media in my head. I don't know, but it's all from around that same time, like late 90s, early 2000s. Like, what did we do for entertainment? Well, we just watch people, drive off Sea-Doos, drive off cliffs, and
smash shopping carts into walls.
Yes. Yeah. My favorite one though, and I can't watch it without like laugh crying, when you're like just like laughing so hard that it hurts, is the one where they're on roller skates and they're in the back of this panel van, or panel truck, and it's supposed to be having like a skate disco, like an old roller skate disco. And so they're back there skating, and it's like they have disco music and it's all fun. And then the truck starts to basically do donuts in the parking lot. And so they're just sliding around in the back of the truck, and like probably no one left that shoot without bruised ribs. Like I feel like, and I'm just like watching that, I'm like, I can feel everyone's pain. I'm just like, oh, your ribs. And just, yeah. It was a very short sketch. I think it was only like maybe a minute long, because once the truck started moving, no one was roller skating for very long after that.
I remember that one, and even just the thought of that happening to anyone is very funny, because it's like you can't stand at all. You're going down right away.
Well, and I feel like there was some type of trick, like they didn't know they were going to drive, or maybe they must have had to, because they signed releases. But just the look of just shock on the people's face, where they're just like, this is impossible, we're gonna get seriously injured. Like, I bet that happened a lot on that show. But yeah,
I wonder how those agreements worked. Like if it was something where in the beginning they're like, sign this thing, by signing this, that means you agree to do whatever it is we put in front of you, sort of thing, you know?
Yeah. And I wonder if you could even do a show like that today. You know, I just, you know, like with the litigiousness of things and lawsuits, I wonder if you could even do a show like that today. But I don't know, things were pretty litigious in the late 90s, early 2000s though, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I don't know if you saw, there's the new Jackass movie coming out.
Yeah. How old are they now though?
It's so bizarre.
When they're like late teens, early 20s, you're like, oh, they'll be fine in a week. You know, they're just, you know, like they'll walk, you know, they're doing a skit the next day. But like, I don't know, what are they, like 40, 50 now?
Yeah. Well, in the trailer, I saw the trailer, Johnny Knoxville has just like pure white hair.
Yeah. So he's going down and he's not getting back up.
I think
maybe they'll do like, you know, all these spin-offs now where they have like the younger generation. So maybe they're passing the torch to the younger generation so another, you know, group of people can grow up learning how to bruise your ribs in creative ways.
That's very true. I feel like you might be right with that. And it's kind of interesting because it's like, it makes me think about the you remember the Tide Pod challenge?
Yeah.
Like, is that the current day Jackass?
Yeah, because I think it's decentralized, right? Like everything else, we talk about like the democratization of, so we're talking about the democratization of stupid, stupid ways to get your ribs bruised, right? Now, instead of having to tune in at a certain time on a station, right, that should be playing music videos, but for some reason don't play music videos anymore, right?
It's all like, dating shows.
But that's gone now. That was like a late 90s comment. Now you're just like, what? There's music on TV? No, what's TV? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But no, I think it's all decentralized, you know? So like that experience now people are doing on TikTok, you know, you go on there, and if, you know, people aren't dancing or whatnot, they're eating Tide Pods or, you know, I was on a chairlift in Vermont, and I was telling a story about how at the time, this was a few years ago, people were throwing cheese, like slices of cheese on their children. Like, and this was a fad. It was a very short-lived fad, but people were doing this, and I turned to the people on the chairlift with me, and I was like, hey, like, you guys know about this, right? And they looked at me like I had four heads. They were just like, what what are you talking about? I'm like, no, it's a thing. It really is. And even as I was just telling it to you now, you're just like, Doug, I don't think that was a thing.
No, actually, it's funny because as you say it, see, when you said it, I thought you meant like throwing cheese from a chairlift, but then no. I remember there were like vines or something like that where people would throw it on their toddler's head, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And why why? But you know, to get likes and to, you know, get a response, right?
Yeah.
You know, but I feel like I feel like this all segues into music and what we do, because I don't know, I won't speak for you, but I know for me, like getting a response is something that I've really focused on, I don't know, probably for like the last 10 years, definitely the last 5 years. But I know there's a certain time when I was writing music, and you can share too about this, but there was a certain time when I'm like, I just kind of made music to make it, and it had to be perfect, and it was this like isolated thing, and it was something that I just did, and it was almost like I was like a monk or something, you know, like it was my calling that I had to do this thing, and regardless if the world or society or my friends or even my parents wanted to listen to it, it was something I had to do. And I remember thinking about it, like going back to the late 90s, like thinking about it as this sort of like calling. And yeah, I would say it's only been since the last maybe 10 years, definitely 5 years, that I've now been more interested in about, well, how can I take what I do and elicit a response, and not be just that I'm like throwing cheese at a toddler. You know what I mean? Like not have it be something where it's, I don't know, maybe like not maybe like child protective services need to be called, but like, you know what I mean? Like that it's not this cheap hokey thing, but that I'm still expressing myself, but that I'm drawing attention to it. And I feel like maybe, and maybe you could talk about this a little bit, but I feel like maybe some people think like that's not what you should be doing if you're quote unquote an artist, or if you're writing music. You shouldn't even be looking for an audience. The audience should find your genius. I don't know, it sounds silly saying it now, but that's definitely, I definitely believe that. It definitely in the late 90s, I definitely believe that.
I think especially once you're going through college and stuff, because when you're in your undergrad and then even at the grad school and stuff, you're exposed to so many new things. And I think particularly in undergrad, that's the first time in most people's lives where their ideals and beliefs are challenged for the first time, like significantly,
Right.
And so it's like we learn about these composers and stuff who've done these like massive things that we idealize and whatnot, and so I think it's easier when you're an undergrad to think in a way where it's like I have to be doing this like cutting edge shock and awe, like you said, like this is for a very specific audience that will come to me, sort of thing, or
and they're right there waiting for the next sort of masterpiece or whatever it may be.
I feel like there's some sort of middle ground in there where it's like,
absolutely,
you write something that like the music you write, if you don't like your music, then why are you writing it?
Right. Yeah. Well, but I feel, and this is my personal belief, I feel like I listen to compositions sometimes and I'm like, did you want to write that, or did your teacher want you to write that? Like, or you know what I mean? Or are you writing, did you write that for yourself? Because it's unmistakable when somebody wrote something for themselves. I can't tell you what it is. Like I can't list what it is to have something that you've written for yourself, but it's just so clear. It's so clear that like, this is just honest. I feel like you can hear that honesty. At least that's what I'm really drawn to.
That makes me think about a composer's voice in a way.
Yeah.
You know the composer Alan Belkin?
No, I don't.
He's in Canada, and he has a YouTube channel. I can't remember what it's called, but he has a book called Musical Composition, Craft, and Art, or something like that. Great. And he talks about, like, I can't remember exactly what he says about it, but he talks about what a composer's voice is, and it's something that I honestly haven't thought too much about, like what makes someone's voice exactly. But I'm blanking right now on what he said. what his definition on a composer's voice
of what it is.
What are your thoughts on that, on how?
Well, I think it could be a really crippling thing, couldn't it? Like, here's the thing. So here's the suffering, right? Is like, I just made the statement, I really appreciate music where people are being honest, right? Mm-hmm. And then we bring in voice into that, right? So then now when I go to put pen to a paper, or when someone puts pen to a paper, if they're concerned about being honest and being true to their voice, I feel like that's just like a recipe to like not write anything. Like I feel like that could just be so crippling, don't you think? Like,
Oh
wait,
yeah.
would my voice if I'm being honest with myself, should this be an A sharp or should it be a B flat? Well, there's other rules. There's rules for that, and we won't get into that. But you know what I mean? Like, or should I even be writing notes? Like, should I be doing that? Should I be improvising this? Should I be using like, and then you're not writing, and then you're very concerned about your voice. I guess I'm not concerned. I it's not voice. It's like that's what that person wanted to write. I don't know. I think back to like some groups, like musical groups, that I was always just like, oh, that's clearly what that person wanted to do. And, I think a pop reference is the Talking Heads. And, I'm a little bit older. So I was too young for the Talking Heads and when they were really popular. But I remember just like listening to their music, even in the 90s and just being like, wow, like they were just doing something that was very unique, but they weren't just doing it to be unique. You know how sometimes you're like, wow, that's bizarre, and it's just bizarre for bizarre's sake. I was just like, that seems really honest and it's really clicking. Julius Eastman, I didn't know a lot about his music. I've always been a fan of minimalism, and I know a lot of the other New York composers and New York minimalists, and I've always really enjoyed their music, but I wasn't really aware of Julius Eastman. And when I heard his music, I said, okay, this is definitely minimalism. This is definitely in this category of minimalism, but this seems unique or honest in some way. This is different. There's a little different interpretation, and it was refreshing. And like I said, I knew nothing about Julius Eastman, so I don't even know. I learned more about his life and what a struggle it was, and I believe he ended up dying in the 90s. Sometimes I think he died in Buffalo, New York. And that's meaningful to me because I grew up in Buffalo. So I just like he had this life in New York, and a lot of his music got lost because he was evicted from his apartment in New York, and ended up, he struggled with addiction. He struggled with a lot of things. He was questioning as far as his identity and his sexuality. So that probably didn't go over well at that time with the minimalism group, and maybe he was an outsider. So I don't know. It's just like a fascinating story. And like, I feel like when I listen to his music, I'm like, yes, I hear all that. I hear like this could be played right after Reich, or this could be played at a Philip Glass concert, but it's a little bit different. It's a little different flavor. And that to me makes it honest. But the word voice is kind of tricky. I think voices, because that could lead to just being like, am I doing what I should be doing?
Right. Yeah. Well, that makes me think back to what you said before about like writing what your professor would have wanted you to write.
Right.
Or like what some external audience you have in your mind, like, oh, this is what they'll want,
Right. Because we hear their voice, right? I do. At least I do. When I'm sitting down to write, I'm like, okay, what's the old rule? And I got this one from one of my first composition teachers. You can't repeat something more than twice. Like the third time, it's got to be different. Like just these like, and you may have never heard that rule, but for me, that's like this like rule. And if I'm breaking it, then I'm going against,
yeah.
And all I'm doing is like repeating something. And obviously I'm a, big fan of minimalism and write a lot of music that is minimal in concept. So a lot of times things are being repeated and things are changing slowly. So just going back to that, I hear those voices a lot, and I don't know if you do, but so it's the voice of, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I doing what, my teachers or these outside voices are saying? Am I doing what my, audience says?
Are there moments? People, yeah. Sorry for interrupting you. Are there moments when you recognize this voice happens more? Like, are there times when that voice happens more regularly than like, or specific instances where that voice will pop up and you're like, every time on Thursdays, it always comes,
Yes, Thursdays. Yeah. It's Thursdays at 3:30 p.m. or 3:05 on TBS. No, it is, I think it's when I'm not doing what I it's when I'm doing what I'm not supposed to be doing, or when I'm overthinking it. Just like there in that whole messed up sentence, I overthink it, right? And I do try to be very sort of spontaneous about the decisions I make. I like to like set up a form and a structure so I have boundaries, but then I like to use my intuition, because then that's just me responding, and I feel like that's going to be more honest.
Okay.
So like, have you ever written a fugue before?
I think I might have as an exercise.
Right. Yeah.
You know, maybe not as like an actual composition and put it out in the world,
Sure.
but as just like an exercise sort of thing.
Right. But I've tried. I mean, I've tried, and then I get like, you know, so many bars in, and I'm just like, now I'm just following some rule, and then it gets too rigid, and yeah. But I don't know about you, but I feel like there's a lot of voices that are often, whenever I'm making decisions in composition, they do come up, and sometimes they're helpful. You know, like there are helpful things that our teachers have taught us and things we picked up along the way. And other times they're just imposter syndrome and other things that are, you know.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is like the hardest thing that's like the worst sort of negative talk for a composer. Because I think all of us have it.
Yeah.
At some point at least, you know.
Yeah, and it's a specific voice. I don't know what yours sounds like, but mine's kind of like, it's always this questioning voice that's like, really? That's just a D major chord. Like, you're just gonna leave that on the page there, just like a D major chord? Like, okay. You know, and it's a very passive aggressive voice. I feel
right. Yeah.
You know, like it's like, really? You're just gonna leave that there? Okay.
It's like, oh, you're you know, you're pretty smart for a kid from Buffalo, you know. Like,
yeah. So, oh yeah, you know. Yeah. So yeah, that's a bad voice. That can't be there when I'm trying to be creative and be honest, you know. I've also found too, I talked a little bit about this technique of windowing that I do, and I use it quite a bit on the recent release. It came out in May. It's Ambient Works, and it's on Albany Records. And it's about 15 years of work. So I've released several albums over the last 5 years, and this one was more of sort of like a travel log, or like a best of things that I've been working on, probably even since grad school. So there's like a few pieces that are even as old as like 2005, 2006, and then, you know, there's a few that were written, you know, yesterday or the day before. But yeah, this technique of windowing, it's really just manipulation of sound files. So I have a source file and I manipulate it, and I do so in really basic ways. Sometimes to the effect where, you know, it might sound like a skipping of a CD, or it's a very small bit or very small section of a piece of music. And, you know, in 2021, or even in 2015, or even in 2010, there's so much you can do with sound, you know. And especially, you know, I'm talking about coming from an approach of being an electronic musician or a composer that is using sound files instead of orchestras. There's so much you can do. You could just get lost in a sea of, well, I could use some granular synthesis here, or, you know, I could be convolving this, or, you know, I could write a program in C sound and manipulate the sound. So like, you know, the sky's the limit, and you could end up working for months and create like a bell. You know what I mean? There's people that do that. They like write a piece for a year and it models the oboe, and you're like, all right, cool. Well, like, I think you can get a really good session musician to come in and do some stuff. But that's important work too, though. I'm not belittling that, because, you know, a lot of the great tools that we have at our disposal are because people have been, you know, spending time doing this. But so I find windowing really just says there's, you know, you can stretch the time, you can alter pitch, you can alter the sort of window size or how much of the clip you're actually hearing. But I try to keep it that basic. So when, you know, you're hearing an electric part in something that I do, and especially like on Ambient Works, a lot of times there's this familiarity because you're hearing something that maybe you've heard before, but it's being manipulated in almost kind of like a glitch aesthetic where it's malfunctioning, it's breaking down. And so for me, actually, you know, kind of going back to what we were talking before, part of the way I deal with those voices is just keep it very limited with what I do. Because sometimes the voice is like, well, actually, why don't we pull this over to MATLAB and do, and it's like, no, we're like going to do this. And, but we could do that. But, so I do actually try to like limit myself in some way too, so that, I can't get too bogged down, because if I stop moving, that's when I think the voices come. So it's not 3:35 or 3:05 on a Thursday. It's when I stop moving forward with a piece, that I have a chance to really start to look at it before it's even done and start judging it and start evaluating it. And then those voices, they come in really fast. Like, oh, that's a D major chord there. Yeah.
That pesky D major chord.
Yeah. There's probably a lot. I think the most recent thing I did had, it was just D major chord like the whole time.
I'm a guitarist, so the D major chord for me is actually like, I love that chord.
Nice. It's up there on the top, on those top strings, just kind of sitting up there. G chord is really the home, the home base. But yeah, if D is like the home away from home, definitely.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it's you were explaining about how you set certain limitations for yourself as a way to move forward. How often when you do that, have you, once again, one of those negative voices, felt that you might be just repeating something you've done before, or was that a worry, or like, are you not concerned about that?
Absolutely. Well, like, so I'm doing the voice now. Like the voice would be like, oh, okay, great. So you're manipulating the sound file in the same way. You've done this on the last 7 songs that you've done, and you did it on a whole album. Like, do we really need more of this? And so one of the things, so the first album I did was Betty in the Sensory World, and I did it about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was one of the first, I was like, okay, I need to put something out, because I had been working for years and years, and I was like, I need to do something. And that first album was really just that process, just the windowing process. So it's about 60 minutes, and the label asked me to kind of cut it up into, more digestible chunks, so they could actually like promote it on a radio, or it could. So I had to kind of cut it up, and it ended up cutting up into like 7-minute parts. And there was natural parts where it could go to a new track or a new section, but that was just windowing. So then I think on the next album, on Beast of Bodmin Moor, I was like, okay, well, I do all this stuff live with electronics and lap steel. Let me work that in. And I'm like, I grew up singing in choirs, so let me bring that in. And on Ambient Works, I kind of went back to sort of in the box. But on the current project I'm working on, I'm bringing live ensembles into it. So live instruments. So I think that's the thing. It's not that I'm not evolving, and it's not that I'm changing, but I'm just trying to be really conscious of not doing everything in the kitchen sink, or getting into that where it's like, this has to be everything. Like, I think of Stockhausen, and, like some of his pieces where it's like 100-person choir, and there's like a helicopter that lands during the, and it's just like, it's like, that's where you go eventually, right? When you're Stockhausen, you're doing experimental, like you write a piano sonata, and you're like, I've got to go further. So I think I'm maybe like 17 albums away from, having, a helicopter involved in one of the productions. But I think that's the natural extension, is like, you've got to do one thing and kind of just keep building on that. And I love this whole album paradigm, because you can kind of, you can focus on one thing and say, this is an album, which is a more contemporary, kind of pop musician sort of perspective of like, I put out an album, and this is the album where I have blonde hair, and like the next album, I'll have red hair or whatever. But and this one will be a beach theme, and the other one will be a circus theme. But that kind of concept of like, okay, I'm doing this album, let me focus on this one kind of idea or series of ideas that are related. And not try to get too far ahead. Because if you stop moving, if I stop moving, then all those voices come in. But if I go too far ahead, I can get frozen as well.
What does stopping moving look like for you?
So I spoke with Erin Rogers. She's an old friend of mine, fantastic composer and saxophone player, and sort of just, an experimental, motivator, pusher, promoter of all this great and experimental music. She's in like 17 groups. And she spoke to me about, dealing with having to write an orchestra piece. She said her nightmare was having to write an orchestra piece and then having a year to write it. And the minute she said that, I was like, yep, that's I've had that nightmare. And you're like, that would be great if an orchestra, orchestra would play my piece, and I'd have a whole year to like, mess around with bowed cymbals and like do all these crazy, things. I'd invite a helicopter. I'd try to find somebody to come in and fly the helicopter in, right? But as she explained it, I was like, yeah, that's my nightmare too, because she worried about it because she would just have so much time to second guess and to really not move. And, I was talking to her, and this is something that I really enjoy too, are deadlines, because the deadlines don't let me stop. And so the flip of that is, well, if I'm moving too quickly, if I'm not stopping and I'm not being thoughtful enough, I'm not going to put something out that's worthwhile. And I think the opposite. I think if I stop moving, if I have too much time, if I get too comfortable, then I'm going to be less intuitive. I'm going to be less honest, because I'll have more time to let those voices kind of muck it up.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because you're sort of becoming complacent in a way. You're not with constantly moving, like having this deadline, and then you move to this project and stuff. It's like you're always kind of a little uncomfortable, or not. I want to say uncomfortable. You're
absolutely
going into discomfort, right?
Yeah,
like stepping outside your comfort zone.
There you go. You're going into discomfort. I like that. That's a lot better. That would sell more T-shirts. That would be then. I'm uncomfortable stepping into discomfort. Yeah,
I'm making it.
Yeah, you should. Yeah. But yeah, I like that idea. I like the idea that you're moving into discomfort, and because here's the other story, right? Too. Have you ever played this in your head? Like, if you had no day job, if you had nothing else to do, all you had to do was to create masterpieces of music or fantastic works of music, right? Is that appealing to you? Like, do you think that would be a good thing?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would. I honestly, I do know that I would have to spend a lot of time doing things other than sitting in my office, composing, thinking, really.
Yeah.
Not composing, but just like racking my brain over stuff,
Yeah. So what do you do, like, we were talking about creative mindset, like what do you do to get into the creative mindset?
One of the things that I've done for a while, like maybe a few years now, is compose right when I wake up.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't allow me to I have to just jump right in. The day hasn't been experienced yet, so I haven't allowed myself to accumulate all this stress and all these thoughts and all these other things, and I'm still I'm half asleep, so it's like
right.
It kind of doesn't matter what I do.
And it's like your dreams drift in there, and that's good, because usually your dreams are what you really want in life anyway.
Right.
Just like on a beach, like having a great time, like, and somehow you can play video games and also be swimming at the same time, like, because it's a dream. You can do whatever you want.
Doesn't matter.
I agree 100% with doing it first thing in the morning. And I am not a morning person. I'm not just like not a morning person. I like hate the morning. I like have like some aggression towards the morning. Love the night. It's a great creative time. But you're absolutely right. If I have to do all the things that I have to do in my day and then sit down, now that I'm exhausted and I'm spent, and I dealt with that one client, or I, did this one part of my job that is really tedious, then I'm spent. But I get up, I like pound 2 cups of coffee and do an hour. Sometimes I do an hour, sometimes I do 2 hours. And it's just that for me, it's more about my perspective for the rest of the day, because I have a good time. I compose, I get something done, I get something accomplished. But then I find when I go to class after that, if I'm working with students, if I'm working with clients or doing a recording or whatever it is I'm doing that day, I feel like because I got my work done, the kind of like the old like grade school, like, did you get your work done, Doug? Did you do your work? Right. And it's like, yes, I got my work done. So now when I'm going to work with a student or I'm going to do some recording, working on something else, something that's not my passion or not something I'm really focused on, I've at least already spent 2 hours or an hour doing that. And then I'm just like less of a jerk in all in all those other things. You know what I mean? Like I'm a little more patient. I'm like, well, I already got my work done for today, I think the worst is when like a week goes by and I just haven't been making time to compose and I'm in a funk and I need to compose, but I'm too tired to compose and the deadline's now approaching, right? And so I agree. I think first thing in the morning, I hate the mornings, but that putting yourself sort of first in the morning, it's been huge for me.
This all resonates a lot for me, man. I like it, like you're preaching to the choir,
Right.
in every way. I mean, it's it's funny because I've had this conversation with my therapist about like when I compose first thing in the morning, the rest of the day almost isn't even a problem. It doesn't matter because I did that one thing that I needed to do.
Right. Because and that's the thing, I always worry about people because like I should really just be worrying about myself, right? But I worry about people that don't have that thing, and it could be whatever. Like for some people it's like they get up and jog, they do exercise, but they're doing something like first or putting something first. I even had a student who was doing mixing and mastering, and he was like way behind on all these projects. He's fantastic at what he does. He's still in school, but he's fantastic at what he does. So he has like just a line of people like, beat makers and the like that are just like want to work with him. And he just balancing school and work and everything else. He just, we were having a conversation. He was just like, I'm overwhelmed. And he's like, I have so much to do and I don't want to do it. And so I was like, try doing it first thing, putting that first. And I think that was a big help for him. And he was like not a morning person. he was like one of those students where like it would be like a 2:00 class or whatever, and you'd be like, that guy just woke up. That guy yeah. He's still got his like pajamas on. He's like, oh yeah. And you're like, dude, it's 2:00, man. You're not living right. It's 2:00.
He's got his morning coffee.
Like, right. Yeah.
His morning coffee. Like
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You just know, like, yeah, this person woke up a few hours ago. But yeah, so I think that's, the other thing for getting in the creative mindset, another thing for me is like drone music. And I do actually like write drone music. So that's like something I do as well. But there's a fantastic station out of San Francisco, Asoma FM, and they have a station called The Drone Zone. And it sounds like very new agey, like you're like, I don't know, like, are you lighting candles? Are you meditating? And that's cool if you do, but it's drone music. And what I really love about it is I can be doing other things and listening to it. And I can also be doing like technical things. Like obviously I couldn't be like having a conversation with somebody while listening to it, but it's fantastic background music in the biggest sense that it is very, very passive. And so I'll often be doing the other tasks that I need to do throughout the day. And if I know I'm really approaching a deadline, so that like 2 hours in the morning is just not going to be enough. If that's not going to be enough time, then, I'm going to need to be creative later. So I'm going to have to get back into this mindset. And so I'll start just listening to the drone music, maybe an hour before I want to compose. And it sort of tricks me into, because drone music is, if you know much about it, it's just like very passive, but sometimes there'll be like a D major chord in the drone and you like hear it and you'll be like, okay, so then this would be a melody. And I find myself, I almost start singing like because it's the like classic drone music, it's missing something, it's like missing a component, I feel like. And it's more about an atmosphere or a soundstage. And so I'll find myself just like sort of singing along to this drone music. And then it's like, oh wait, I'm like being creative. I like trick myself into doing it. And then it's about quick, get paper in front of me and, or I'm having this idea or I'm having that.
That's really clever.
I don't know if you do anything to like prime the pump, as it were.
Yeah, yeah, I like the front of the pump.
Yeah,
I've experimented a lot with things. I mean, I've
yeah,
tried like jamming out on my guitar, just
right,
improvising,
right, yeah,
or listening to music that I personally enjoy.
yeah,
The concern with doing that is I don't want to then write what I just listened to, you know.
right. But aren't you
Um,
really writing what you just listened to? Like, like,
Probably.
like I don't mean I'm not like I don't mean to be condescending or tell you what you're writing, but aren't we writing what we're experiencing and what we're hearing?
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
I,
clever approach though, with listening to the music to kind of get you into a creative mindset.
yeah,
Like or music that you said is missing a certain component, and so you're starting to fill out those components
yeah.
with your singing and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
that's cool.
I think if it was something that you really liked, then I find like if I'm listening to Reich or something else that I like really like or that I know, if I'm listening to it, I usually just kind of get I either get like really excited about it or I get kind of like, well, I can't do that. Like, come on, like I can't. It's like a Stockhouse piece. I don't have access to a helicopter. Like
Oh yeah.
I should go back to accounting or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Right, right.
so that I can find that too. Like if it's too stimulating the music, if it's something that I'm too into, it'll almost like prevent me from being creative. But
Yeah, yeah, because you're then like certain music demands your focus like that much more,
yeah,
to where you kind of you step out of like being that creative, individual, and now you're like um a listener, or maybe even like a music theorist at that point, analyzing
mhm.
from a way
Right,
of like
yeah.
trying to understand the music and not to try to
Right.
create your own.
Right. Or something I always do, I'm like listening to just the snare, or I'm listening to just like one instrument. I'm like, I wonder how they recorded that and EQ'd that. Like that's kind of interesting. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, then you're in the weeds, and yeah.
I don't think it's challenging too, like especially with music that, if it's music you've never heard, but it's the type of music that you would listen to, like let's just say minimalism, for example,
Sure.
and you're exposed to this new composer,
Yeah.
and a lot of people who aren't musicians use background music to work on their stuff, right? Like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
I gotta send some emails, let me put on some background music.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is it like for you? Because so I'll give my whole experience is like, if I'm trying to punch out an email,
Yeah.
and I put on a piece of music that like it's something minimalist but I've never heard it before, I
Yeah.
can't focus on the email because I'm
No.
like, I'm in tune with what's happening.
Absolutely not. Yeah, like and that's why the drone zone is great too for like writing, because it's so passive that you can be like writing. I like can't be listening to like Napalm Death and like
Oh no.
like writing anything. But when I work though, it's weird. Whenever I'm doing like really tedious stuff, I listen to just 80s music. And it could be like the worst 80s pop music, whatever it is. Because maybe I grew up with those songs and I've heard them so many times that it's like a warm blanket. So I like know where they go. I've heard them hundreds of times. And so it's in the background. It's a comforting thing. It's a music thing. It makes it more enjoyable, but it's not something that's going to stop and, pull my attention away. I mean, if it's like a new piece by like, I was doing something the other day and I had never heard Hallelujah Junction by John Adams. And so sure enough, like, I'm like, okay, well, I'm working. I'll just like put this on or whatever. And I was like, I got no work done whatsoever. Because it was like you said, I became like the music theorist. Then I became the producer, and I was trying to be like, okay, how did they mic the pianos? And then I'm like, an hour goes by and it's like, oh, I still need to send that person an email.
Right, yeah. It's too easy for that to happen.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
too easy. I mean, like, it's, we're trained for that sort of thing, to listen,
Mm-hmm.
to analyze, also to enjoy, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
we like hold our relatives and family hostage every time we go to like a supermarket, and we're like, no, let's just stay in the car for like 5 more minutes. It's almost over. And they're
yeah.
like, we need groceries. You need to get out of the car now, please.
Yeah, and then when you're in the car, you get home, it's like, oh wait, what about this? And they're like, the ice cream's melting, we got to get it
Yeah,
inside.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
What is your experience with film scores, like when you're watching a movie, do you ever, how drawn in are you to the music itself, or are you just so engrossed in the film that like the music is just another immersive aspect of what you're experiencing?
Yeah, that's funny. And that's how you can tell. That's like my litmus test for if somebody's a musician or not. And it's not like they have to prove anything or whatever to me, but I'm always like, do you like to draw? Like, do you like music? If you watch a movie and you remember more about the score than the movie, then you're a musician. And I'll never forget, I went to see this movie, it was like years ago, and it was an okay movie. I think like Johnny Depp was in it, and it was some type of like spy espionage movie. I can't remember anything else besides that basic plot. And it was filmed fine and all that, but the music was just beautiful. And it was just like kind of like a neo-romantic thing. It wasn't anything like, there were D major chords all over the place, right? Maybe D major sevenths, but whatever. It was very straightforward, but it was just beautiful, and it was wonderfully recorded. And so I remember just like sitting watching that movie in the theater and just being like, oh, what a delightful film this is. What this is wonderful. And the person I was there with the movie, I turned to her and she was like, well, how did you like the movie? And I was like, oh, it was pretty good. I'm like, oh, the music though, wasn't it beautiful? And she was like, oh, I didn't really hear, was there music or and I don't remember anything from the movie. I remember it's like Johnny Depp, and I think there was like a double cross at the end or something. I don't know. But the music was great. So you're talking like, how do I respond to film? That's one of the reasons why I do love to go see movies in the theater, because the sound systems are usually, it's a very dead room, right? They have all this like padding and insulation in the room. And then they usually have these full range systems that are just so, they can be almost too loud a lot of times, but it can just be so immersive. So I remember seeing, what was it, Blade Runner 2049 a few years ago. And I saw it more recently in an Atmos theater, and like an Atmos version of it. It was too much. It was like it's almost like a 3-hour movie. So it was like 3 hours of like at 180 decibels, it felt like, but it was just so immersive, and you could just hear everything and feel everything. And then of course, it's anybody who likes 80s music or electronic music or synths. I mean, that soundtrack and those writers, are fantastic. So the music was beautiful, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the Christopher Nolan films, I mean, you have the Hans Zimmer scores, and they're beautiful in a very sort of cinematic way, right? And that's not always something that our, at least my teachers were always interested in, this idea of making film music. Now, of course, if you go to a film scoring program, they would be very interested in that. But I think there's something to be said about just writing really beautiful music or writing something appropriate for film. And, some of that music is just, it's just breathtaking. And even like The Revenant, there's a piece in there by John Luther Adams, which is kind of, sort of a more abstract percussion piece. And, but it works perfectly in the movie, and it's just so striking, and it's so unsettling. And, so not all movie music is like, neo-romantic. It can be very experimental.
Yeah, definitely. I notice a lot of more recent like horror movies, or at least maybe thrillers, right?
Yeah.
Whenever like I can actually specifically remember, I think it was I think my light bulb is flickering.
Oh, I haven't seen anything.
Okay. Maybe it's my eyes.
Yeah. Are you drinking enough water?
I should drink more.
There you go. Hydrate.
Might have been the film Knives Out, or it was, God, I just remember my girlfriend and I were in our old apartment in Bowling Green, actually. And we were watching something on YouTube or whatever, and then I wasn't paying attention, and I just heard the music, and I was like, what is this? And I looked over, and it was a horror movie. And I just remember being so taken aback by like you said, like the experimentalism in it. Like there was like some more like Bartok pits and, like extended techniques, but then it was also, it resolved to some sort of chord in some way. Like there's your D minor chord.
D minor, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
because it was a scary movie, so it would be D minor, not D major,
yeah.
but yeah.
But yeah, it caught my ear right away. And
well, and that's kind of what we were saying earlier about like eliciting a response, right? So like the idea that the music sort of speaks to an audience or listener, not just like throwing cheese, like literally or figuratively throwing cheese, but somehow being experimental, exploring new sounds, but having a way that it does draw a listener to it. I mean, the really great composers, they'll do that so effortlessly, and you're just like, oh man, that's when my imposter syndrome is like, there's no way I could do that. Like, it's just like, like, oh, they just did that so effortlessly and just drew me in.
This is making me think about is it Sibelius 2, Symphony Number 2? There's like, I think it's the second one. The finale is like, it starts off, it's like all fast and like cruising along, and then it builds up to this huge climax. Absolutely. which actually might be in D major.
Right. Yeah.
And it's this beautiful melody, this like long flowing, and every time I hear that, I'm like, this dude knew exactly proportions and form, and how to like elicit that response. Because every time I hear it, I just stop. If I'm like chopping onions listening to Sibelius, I just stop and I'm like, I'm keying into whatever's happening.
Absolutely. And it kind of reminded me, we were talking about films, the end of Hereditary, or Heredity. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a horror film, and it's if you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. Gabriel Byrne's in it, and I'm forgetting the lead actress's name. Toni Collette is in it. Yeah. And you look at it and you're like, I think I'll pass on this one, but it's terrifying. And there's a final scene, which I won't get into details for everybody who's going to watch it, but there's this music that's playing, and it is grotesque and beautiful all at the same time. And I'm like, yes, like this. And I'm like, this is experimental music. I am conflicted about what I'm hearing. Yeah. And I'm like, and I think that's like going back to the earlier definition of like, what is honest. And I think one of those factors of honesty is I'm hearing something and I'm very conflicted about what I'm hearing. It's not a D major chord. It's not a D minor chord, but it is, but it's not. And I don't know how I feel about that. Right. You know what I mean? Like, we keep going back to the well on that, but like, that's what I mean. That's one of those things where I'm like, wow, this person is being really honest because they're telling a story, or they're telling a narrative where maybe there's not one answer, maybe there's not two, and there's some sort of interpretation. And the whole reason why people are throwing cheese, and I don't know why, but I surmise the whole reason why people are throwing cheese onto their children, or were for one time, is that people want to participate, right? And they want to be engaged in something. So I think that's the challenge, right? Is to write a piece of music that can get people involved, that can get people engaged. But if I stop to think about that too much, I mean, those voices, they're only a few steps behind me. If I let that voice get into the writing process,
totally, yeah,
then I'm sunk.
This is one of the things that I really admire about film composers. And I would love to be involved in something like that in some capacity one day. But I mean, the ability to, like what you're saying, to elicit a response by trying to portray a certain emotion or character or concept in that moment of the film. What was I watching yesterday? Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman.
Lone piano line.
Yeah. And like the moments when that would happen, it's like you don't miss it. And like it stands out to you, and like you feel this thing is happening, and the tension, like you were saying before. Yeah. I feel like there's that discomfort too.
And it's just a single piano line. And that whole movie is about people are doing these group things together, but they're still very isolated and very alone. And I feel like that's what that piano line is about. And it's a reminder that it's just a solo unaccompanied piano, and it's just doing the same thing over and over again. And that's beautiful in that film. But you know, a lot of people wouldn't be, I mean, it's a Stanley Kubrick film, right? So he's going to do whatever he wants. And if they're going to have a one note piano score, like that's okay. Like he's comfortable doing that. But a lot of directors, a lot of producers would be worried if it challenges too much or if it's too abrasive. But I mean, I guess after you work in the industry for 40, 50 years and create these fantastic movies that people use in like film studies classes, then you can do you can do a movie where the composer suggests it's just a one note piano line, and that's okay.
Well, this makes me think a little bit. So through our correspondence, and we were talking a little bit about creativity, and we've been talking about that here too and stuff like that. Yeah. And I've been kind of thinking in my mind today about like what is creativity and how do you define creativity? So I'm kind of curious as to how do you define creativity, Doug?
Oh, I don't know if I know the answer to that. I don't know if I know how to define creativity. I think it's something that I need to do. So somebody once asked me, it was kind of like a softball question. They were like, why do you compose? And I was like, because I have this like deep need when I get up, like I have to do it. And I was even talking about like, if I'm not creative first thing in the morning, if I don't get to it, I will physically get, and mentally I will get irritable. I will get agitated. Because there's something very therapeutic about it. It's meditative. There's something, and there's a lot of research and people who are a lot smarter that talk about the effects it has on your brain being creative and doing a creative act. But defining it, I don't know. It's the thing that I need to do, because the less of it I do, the further I get away from being comfortable and enjoying other things in life. But it's such a rewarding thing. So it's not like I'm addicted to creativity and I like have to do it and it's ruining my life, creativity. But for some people it does. For some people they just have to keep writing and keep making all this stuff. And we hear these really horrible stories about Beethoven and about Mozart and just other composers in general, where their life is their work, and that's sort of admired sometimes. And like I was saying earlier, like in the late 90s, and definitely when I first started school, I was like, this is a calling and this is a thing. This will be my life. This will define my life. And so creativity, I define it as it's the thing that I do because it's very important part of my life. But I think the struggle is that doesn't define my life.
Right. Yeah. Sort of the idea of, what's that saying? Like you're not your work or something like that.
Sure.
Or you're not your job, or I can't. I don't even know how.
Yeah,
it goes,
it's your
honestly.
voice. We were just talking about like finding your voice, doing it your way, being honest with yourself. But so it is you, it is you, and it can be really easy to just be like, this is all there is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird sort of thing. I mean, because there's we have energies. We have certain energy to be creative in a musical way, like which I view that as like a mental energy. Physical energy, which it could be creative in certain aspects, I guess. Like I feel like for me that's expendable in like I have more. I could do that longer throughout the not longer. I could do that any other points throughout the day. Whereas composing, that like we said earlier, doing it first thing in the morning. If I don't do it first thing in the morning, I can't do it at night. But if I work out I could work out at 9 at night or 9 in the morning. Like the physical energy is less of a thing for me.
Yeah, I think it builds up. I think it builds up throughout the day. For me, I do at the quiet moment in the morning. I do this work, and sometimes it's very detailed work. Like sometimes I'm editing a score, sometimes I'm doing something very detailed, but it's because I'm the calmest. And I think as the day goes on, and you just deal with people, and like there's just always, every day there's like one thing I feel like that happens in everyone's life where you're just like, you have to like just be like, take a deep breath and walk away, like that's and so you do the right thing in the moment, but that like stays with you. So I feel like for me, I like to, exercise at the end of the day, and then it's just, it's kind of mindless, but yeah, it's, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to be creative and to keep that going. You have to do physical stuff. You have to eat right. You have to compose at the right time. So there's a lot of other things that go into being a composer. Because I think there's an amount of suffering in it. I think there can be, if you're, I hear stories about people like staying up all night, and then sometimes, alcohol and drugs get involved in it. And then that's just like, extends like the madness or the craziness about it. So I think it's like finding a healthy creative lifestyle. I think that's something definitely over the last 10 years or so, I've been really trying to focus on, is like, how can I make this part of my life so that it's important and my life is meaningful without having it be the sole, all-consuming factor.
Yeah, well, and also you have, which we haven't even talked about yet. Speaking of which, we've been going for an hour at this point.
Oh man, okay.
You had mentioned you wanted to go for 45 minutes. We've crossed that point.
we've crossed the Rubicon, right? Yeah. Sorry about that.
No,
you
have
not to be. I didn't want to. I'm always so jealous of Alan because of Alan Tyson, because he's so passionate about music, and when I did a podcast episode with him, it was just so fantastic to talk with him, to talk with someone who took so much joy in the creative process. I feel like my experiences, there's a little bit more suffering involved, and there's a lot of kind of prep, but it seems like he really enjoys it. And that's the whole reason why I do the podcast. The whole reason I do the podcast is to just talk to other people about their process. And that, if anything, it's like, oh, I do that too. Like, or I'm like, I absolutely don't do that. That's I don't say that on the show. I'm like, no, what are you talking about? But I get to hear other people's perspective and other people's ideas. Yeah. And really that's what the show is about. The show it had sort of a therapeutic idea behind it. I wanted to connect with other people that were being creative, and not people who are musicians, or is specifically musicians, or not people who are conductors, or people who are in the creative process and in the trenches, and either have like Alan, somebody who finds a lot of joy in it, and then talking to other people too who really struggle. So it's been a great show. I just finished up the second season. The third season will be beginning in the fall, and we'll have a new round of guests. But it's just great. I think it's almost like composer therapy in a way, because I think, we have all different types of people come on and have different perspectives. Some people are writing choral music. Some people are doing electronic music. I even have some jazz and pop artists that come on there as well. And so that's really what the show is about. And I try to, so one of the reasons why I was like, we should stick to 45 minutes is because on that show, I try to make it a shorter 22-minute, less than 30-minute show, so that it's concise, and I do a lot of editing. And so I was trying to be as laconic and precise with this, but unfortunately, if you get me talking about creativity, well, here we are.
I am not complaining at all, honestly, because this has been so great. And the thing is too, is I'm more than happy to go, as if we want to keep talking, we can definitely keep talking, but I don't want to overstep any boundaries for you. If you want to cut it, sooner than later, that's fine with me. But yeah, I listened to Alan's episode. I had to listen to Alan's because he was on the podcast a little while ago. And I listened to Eric Salazar, the first episode.
Yes, Eric, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And
he had a 3-part. In the first season, I was doing multi-parts.
Yeah. I listened to it on SoundCloud, I think it was.
Yep.
Yeah. But one of the things that I love about your podcast off the bat is that the title basically explains what the show is.
I hope so, but I've like had to put a colon, like the process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music.
Right.
But that's so long. So you're like, hey, you can search it, and people are like, what? I got to creativity, and then my phone died. But yeah. But yeah, I think that's what it tries to be about. That it tries to be about creativity and experimental music. And I made that distinction because I was like, I could really have anybody on. I could have anybody who's being creative. Like, there's so many creative things that people are doing. I mean, there's baking and cooking, that could be a creative act. There's accountants that do creative accounting. That can be a creative act. But would that be interesting for the show? So I had to kind of narrow it to experimental music, or I chose to. And that's a huge area in itself. And like I said, I have drone groups on there. I have electronic groups on there, choral composers, opera composers, film composers, people who don't call themselves composers. They're allowed on there too, because they make experimental music too. So I think it's been a great show, and it's available anywhere. The first and second season are up on anywhere where you find your podcasts, so you can get them anywhere there. And they're also, I think, available, the episodes, on SoundCloud, so you can watch it there. Eric Salazar is a great friend and a collaborator that I've worked with on past albums. Not only his own music on his own albums, but he's played on some of mine. And Eric's another person that finds a lot of joy in being creative. And Eric is also somebody who's like really into D&D. And that's something that maybe some people would like snicker at and say that's like not cool. But Eric is just like really honest, and he's like, I enjoy D&D, and so he writes music that is for people engaging in that activity.
Really?
So like, he writes music for people who are engaging in it, and it's like, well, that's not my thing. Like, that's not what I want to do. But I feel like when we were talking about honesty, it's like he enjoys doing that. He knows that community, he knows that audience, and he writes music for it, and it's really successful within that community. So yeah, I think Eric's a great person to find somebody who takes a lot of joy in it and has found out how to be honest. And I think he's found his audience.
Well, that's one thing that was interesting with Eric. I didn't know that. I didn't know about him writing for D&D, or writing music specifically for those sort of.
Right. He does all types, but that's like one of his. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had. Do you know Elisa Nair? Soprano.
Yes. Yeah.
She was on the podcast, and she plays D&D, and
yes,
and we were talking about that. And one of the things, I've never played it before. I know about it.
Yeah.
But I had mentioned to her that that's like the sort of game where, because it goes on for so long and stuff, I would love to watch people play it, because it looks so fascinating. I don't know if I'd partake or not, but like, maybe have a beer and just hang out and and then play Eric's music in the background, There
you go. You could be like the DJ for that event. That could be you could do like a whole thing where you drive a truck up to people playing D&D. You come in full audio system. You could do surround sound.
Yeah.
It'd be fantastic. You get lights and whatnot. You could dress up like an orc. It'd be a great time.
Oh wow, yeah. I have the Batman mask from 1989, like Michael Keaton's Batman. So.
Oh, the original, the authentic, the original.
Oh yeah.
No, that's just funny. And so, yeah, I think that's the big thing too, though, is like, whatever you're going to do, whatever it is you're going to do, whatever's honest to what you want to do, then do it, and like find your audience. Because I mean, I go to these shows, especially here in Boston, there's all these like just great experimental music going on, and sometimes it's being made by people who aren't even musicians. Well, I guess they are, because they're making music, but they're not formally trained as musicians. And I see this stuff and I'm like, whoa, this would make the most avant-garde school of future music, as Cumatic or whatever. this would make everyone really uncomfortable. And there's an audience of people cheering on and participating in these concerts. So I'm like, you know, I guess wherever you go, you know, there is a place for what you do. But I think that's the struggle, is finding that audience. But you know, once again, like, we got to keep moving. For me, I got to keep moving, and I got to keep writing pieces. So I can't be spending all my time thinking about, you know, is this what my audience wants? Is this what, you know, I can't start asking those questions.
Right. That's a whole other aspect of being a composer, where like like if you're thinking too much about the music itself, then it's like, oh no, you're uncomfortable. and
Right.
and then thinking too much about,
I love this. You're moving away from moving into discomfort to just discomfort.
right. Yeah. And then the same thing, thinking about the audience too much. That's, oh wow. Yeah, that's a dangerous spot to be in.
Yeah.
It's I think for me, one of the things that like I have the biggest, when I have those negative voices the most, is when I'm trying to write a piece under a deadline that I'm not prepared to meet.
Yeah.
Where I have to write really quickly, because then I'll default to things that I do. You know, like, oh, here's an Adam Kanawha thing.
Mm-hmm.
It ended like Adam Kanawha ends it, you know, like.
Yeah. Well, your name is on the piece. So
that's true.
it should probably be, you know what I mean? I'm just playing, there's the counter voice, right?
Right.
Well, of course I'm doing that because it's me and that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I've only got 5 minutes to finish this. So yeah. But don't you think, like, I feel like every piece is a little bit of everything else I've already written, with just something a little bit different. Maybe. Or sometimes it's just I've done the same thing again, but maybe use slightly different materials, so I feel like it came out a little bit better. But it's still, you know, a painting of a beach. You know what I mean? Like, it's still I you know, and so I wonder about that. I wonder about how different each piece really is, and if that's okay. I think it's okay, because I'm taking everything, all my experiences, and I'm putting it there, and hopefully each time I add a little something to it.
That's a really interesting question. Yeah, and whether that, like, how much does that matter?
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I think you're very right. I mean, because it's you write what you know. You sometimes try new things, but you only go so far with it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
This is a pretty obvious one for you, but when you go from writing electronics and then writing purely for acoustic instruments, how does your process change much, or is it the same?
So there's always stuff missing when I write acoustic music. There's always stuff missing. There's always parts of the music that are missing, because I just know I can express myself better with, or not better, but just I know, like, how I want to express myself is with an electronic or some type of component, like doing just a string quartet. Like, that just seems like, I don't know, I'd love to do it. You know, like, if somebody commissioned me to do it, like if somebody calls me up tomorrow and says, Doug, we need a string quartet, I'll do it. Done. But the idea of just a string quartet is less exciting to me than, well, we'd like to do a string quartet, but we'd like there to be like a little something, like a little electronics. Maybe you mic one of the instruments, and then, like, I don't know, maybe there could be like video. And see, if anybody opens the door like that, just an inch, then we, you know, we're looking for helicopter rates, right? To get the helicopter to come
Right. Yeah.
But no, like, so for me, when I write acoustic music, I often find myself leaving gaps. There's gaps in the music. There's missing parts, because I know, or I have a strong feeling that I want to fill it with, you know, some of the windowing and some of the things that I do in purely drone or electronic music that I create, because I think that's what's unique. I'm like, so it's a D major chord, but why is it unique? Well, because it's me writing it, so it's different than, because it's not anybody else writing it. But then it's a D major chord, but then there's also this like sample behind it that you can kind of figure out what it is, but you're not sure what it is. But then there's a string quartet going on, and then maybe there's a visual component too.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So you sort of consider yourself electronic composer first, or electronics is like like you said, like the way that you can most readily express what you're trying to communicate, sort of thing?
You know, I've never written a symphony.
Mm-hmm.
I've never written an orchestral piece. That's correct. I was trying to make sure that wasn't false. I've written a band piece, like a wind ensemble. Excuse me, wind ensemble. I've written a wind ensemble piece with just purely wind ensemble, but I've never written an orchestral piece. And I love orchestral music. I think it's fantastic. I think it's beautiful. I love the fact that there's that many people sitting on a stage creating music together. I love it. And it's organized, and it sometimes it is, and there's all these moving parts. I love it. And it's just this huge mess of a sound. But I don't know, and I'm 41 now. So I don't know if I could express myself the best through an orchestra. I think I could probably express myself better, you know, using electronics, manipulating sound. I mean, that's what an orchestra, you know, you can say in a very abstract way. Orchestral composer is manipulating sound and instruments, but I mean, I think the computer has a big part of how I create music, and I think I can express what I'm thinking the best that way. For now. That might change.
I have a thought, and I want to throw it out there real quick.
Great.
And you can totally reject this. But I want to ask it too, because I feel like there are people who would listen to this and might get something. So I'm writing my first piece right now that uses fixed media. Great. And it's for oboe and fixed media.
Great.
And I use Reaper.
Awesome.
My thought to create the fixed media is to sample sounds, record whatever, me smacking my guitar, or like, I don't know, dropping glass, whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think would be a smart way to approach this? Or what would you say to a student if I was your student and I came to you and I said, I'm writing this piece right now. I'm not sure how I should handle this. I'm so used to writing acoustic music. Electronics is so foreign to me.
If you were my student, I would say go become a lawyer. No, I'm just kidding. It's horrible. That's horrible. By the way, I'm joking, or I'm absolutely joking about that. But I feel like there's some hot takes like that happen in the teaching profession, where like a good teacher has a bad day, and that just, you know, no. And I don't mean to slight that question. What would be the best approach? Well, I don't know. I don't know what the best approach would be. I clearly don't. How would I approach it? Well, I would think about the instrument. I would think about what I'm writing for. I would also, if I was a guitarist like you are, I think it's okay. You might be like, oh, I have to get away from the guitar, but it's like, you know, the guitar, you're a great guitar player, so you know the instrument intimately, right? You play all different types of music on it. So why wouldn't you, you know, why not start there? Because couldn't the piece just be, you said it's for oboe, right? So
yeah.
so we can, but yeah, you know, some people like to go, okay, a few actionable items, right? What are the tools? So you could go and sample the oboe. You could have them play notes. You could sample it. You could use all different types of processes to manipulate it. You could just create this really bizarre sound stage and have it be very improvisatory and have the musician play over the top of it. So I don't know what the right way is, but how would I approach it? I would probably approach it by going and listening to great oboe pieces from over the centuries. And then I would go and find audio files of those recordings, chop them up, obliterate them, move them around, window them, get some type of sonic landscape happening, and then start to make some intuitive decisions about what I want the oboe to do and how I want the oboe to interact with that. So I guess my method is implying some copyright infringement, but I think that's how I'd approach it. So I don't know the best way. Sometimes people ask the person who's commissioning it what they want, but
Nah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me think, chopping it all up and using pre-recorded material makes me think, is it James Tenney who did that Elvis piece or something like that? Where he took like a fraction of a second of an Elvis piece and just like, or Elvis song and like, right? Is that
It's
right?
like a Plunderphonics, and then it makes me think of Girl Talk that was more recently, where this DJ was using, you know, the kind of acapella tracks and kind of tracked out versions of different songs and sort of mashing them up, mixing them together. This was about 10-15 years ago, before like the mashup was really like a whole phenomenon. Now you can go on YouTube and everything's mashed and put together. You know, I would say too, why would it be any different than how you normally write music, right? Like, just because it's fixed media and there's an oboe involved and you have to have some type of, you're probably going to be using the computer more in the compositional process. Why would the approach really have to be any different than what you normally do? I mean, I'm sure you have a process, right? You have, you know, 3 very sharp pens or whatever, 1/2 cup of coffee. Like, I'm sure you have like a very like this, I'm writing now, like this is what I do. I don't know what your process is, but so why would it be any different? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think for me, it's the unfamiliarity. There's that discomfort.
Right. And so, like you said, though, I love this. You're like moving into discomfort, not a full-on panic attack, right?
Right.
Like moving into, which is already, you're kind of saying like doing fixed media, maybe that's a little bit uncomfortable. But yeah, and everyone like says too, like there's like ascumatic music, there's acoustic music, and there is this, like, people put this like schism in between the two things. And you know, and then film music, right? Experimental music versus film music. Like, you know, the people put these like categories and put these things into niches or niche. And I don't know. I think that's helpful for like Spotify playlists, but I'm not sure that's really necessary when you're writing.
That, yeah, because then you're kind of coming to it with the preconceived notion of what that thing is. Like saying like, oh, there's this guy, this see, I still don't know how to explain it. There's this musician named Fantastic Negrita, and a few years ago, my girlfriend and I discovered him, and we had no idea how to describe his music, because it's like kind of bluesy, but it's like heavy, and so we just sort of came up with this description called hardcore blues. And
so the uncertainty engaged you, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm not quite sure.
Yes, and that was one of those things too, where my ears perked up, because it sounded like something familiar, but it was also not. You know, there's that voice, right? The honesty in it. And whenever I would want to turn someone on to him, I would be like, oh, you got to hear this guy, and I was like, I don't know how to explain it. The way I think about it is like this, but like you just have to hear it, sort of thing. And I always worry trying to categorize stuff, because then, like I said, like people come to it with their idea of what that thing is.
And there's a lot of expectations by what an oboe plus fixed media needs to be.
Right.
Even the fact you called it you call it fixed media, and you didn't call it tape.
Yes.
Or you didn't call it and computer. And you didn't say electronics, but usually electronics means that there's live processing going on sometimes. See, the words don't even always mean what they mean too, right?
True. Yeah.
So what is fixed? Because fixed media could also mean video.
Exactly. I can.
A fixed media could be a painting. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously we're like, okay, fixed media means there's going to be this weird soundscape going on behind it. Or maybe not. Maybe it's like a Mario Davidovsky type thing, where it's like instrument plus 2 speakers, you know, interacting, you know, in a very kind of tape plus instrument type of way. Or maybe it's a soundscape, you know.
I love that you're breaking it down like this, because it's breaking down my perspective on what it is, or what it could be, actually.
Yeah, but see, I think you should probably wake up tomorrow or the next day and just start working on it.
Yeah.
Because I think we're stopping. You know what I mean? Like we're stopping and like analyzing it as like, what in 21st century culture, what does fixed media even mean anymore?
Right.
You know,
right.
like, and then like if you're trying to write, like and think about the expectations behind that, right? You know, you think about Brahms, you know, like taking years and years to write his first symphony, living in the shadow of other composers, and man, there's a person who needed to keep moving and not get stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely been dreading putting the whole fixed, the electronics, whatever you want to call it, the fixed media aspect together, because I've already been writing the oboe part, because that's what I know. And I've thrown things together on Reaper, like took some recordings that we did through our Zoom calls. Threw on some effects, just kind of manipulated it, maybe like stretched it out the time for how long it lasts, sort of thing. And like you said before, how like the amount of control you have using the computer, how the amount of control you have over the sound is one of the things that really intrigues me about it. Like you can offset it pitch wise by however many microcents you want, just enough so that like over the course of like 25 seconds there's like one beat, as in beating, like the phenomenon of beating.
Or you can make a 60-minute album off a 3-second guitar loop. You can make a 60-minute album, and somehow you can, through manipulation, make that interesting. And so you can do a lot with very little, or you can do very little with too much. Like so I guess I would be a horrible composition teacher for you then, wouldn't I? If I just be like, I don't know, man, like just get up early and crank something out. But maybe don't overthink it. I don't know. I know what I would do. And I think just being like, okay, well, I'm going to start by listening to the Drone Zone, and then I'm going to start chopping up some files and seeing what ideas I come up with. And I would probably do it in reverse. I would do the fixed part first and then figure out how the oboe incorporates with that.
That's what a smart person would do.
No, that's just the way I would do it. I think you are doing it in a very smart way too, because now you're going to have this, like, the oboe writing will be this thing, right? And the oboe writing, I feel like in your piece, most likely will feel like a composed, very thoughtful thing. And maybe the idea is the fixed media will just enhance that a little bit. Like you don't have to have like 360 sound where things are like flying around the room and there's like a cannon explosion and then like, it's like the THX theme like at the start of the movie. It doesn't. It could be just like you add a little reverb and like it just adds some ambience to it.
Yeah.
Or ambiance. Sorry, I'm from Buffalo, so ambience.
Don't worry. I say all kinds of things like my girlfriend picks on me. I say horror instead of horror movies.
Oh yeah. What is that? Is that Chicago accent?
No, I'm from New Jersey. I don't even know if that's New Jersey accent, honestly.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you say coffee? How do you say coffee?
I say coffee.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I don't know if it's too powerful. It might come out sometimes.
Yeah.
Like the coffee.
Yeah.
Bag of donuts, sort of like piece of shit. Like.
Yeah. It comes out when it does. And
right.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Me and my sister, she's really the only one I still know from Buffalo. And so we'll have conversations and it'll just one word will be, you'll just be like, no, that's unacceptable. We live in New England now. We can't.
Right. Yeah.
They'll know we're not from here if you
what is
suppress our Buffalo name.
Yeah. It's like oh, that's funny. Yeah. What is there a sort of Buffalo like?
I think I was talking with Rob. Why am I forgetting Rob's last name? Fantastic composer, and he's from Northwest Ohio, Central Ohio, and talent, right? But like talent. So it's that like, it's kind of like Chicago where it's like a little bit further back in the mouth, and yeah.
This is making me laugh because my girlfriend, she's from Royal Oak, Michigan, which is right outside Detroit.
Yeah.
That's literally how she speaks.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
when she says my name, she'll be like, yeah, Adam.
Adam.
Yeah.
Yep.
I always pick on her for it.
Well, it's not like here in Boston they don't have a ridiculous accent here. I remember, and people correct you here too. I was talking about, I referred to Concord, Massachusetts, and they're like, Concord? I'm like, yes, Concord. And they're like, nah, Concord. What you want is Concord. You want Concord. I was like, okay.
The Boston accent's one of my favorites.
It's intense.
It's one of my
If you go to Southie, you might just be like, what is that? But you still comprehend, the brain still is like, yep, I heard what that person said. But
yeah. I mean, I know there's like, what's the one area, is it like pronounced, they say Worcester or something, or
Worcester. Yeah, but it looks like Warcrester kind of.
Yeah,
Worcester. Yeah. Well, it's like the street in Bowling Green, Ohio. It's spelled Wooster, Worcester, right? So you can say it the correct way, but that would be spelled very differently in New England. Yeah.
Here's an interesting one from Bowling Green. I don't know if you remember, or if this is, but people would say needs done.
Needs done.
Like, the grass is. Like the grass needs to be cut. It needs done. It needs, the grass needs done, or the laundry needs done.
Really? I've never heard that.
Never heard that?
No, I never heard that while I was there. I mean, I was either in a practice room or at Grumpy Dave's down on Main Street.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's called Grumpy Dave's anymore, but
no, it still is.
Yeah, it still is.
Yeah. It's like the second floor above Easy Street.
That's right. The Easy Street Cafe. Yeah.
Great food at Easy Street.
I don't think I've ever been in the Easy Street Cafe.
When was the last time you were in Bowling Green?
Oh, it would have been 2006, I think. I've been meaning to get back for the wonderful music and arts festival that they have there, especially as far as experimental music is concerned. It's fantastic, and a lot of great people, a lot of great memories from there. Just haven't gotten back, but no time like the future.
Totally, yeah. Maybe sometime you can be the Kier artist in resident.
Oh wow! Well, that would be a great honor. Yeah.
There's the is it Kipler, or I can't remember his name. This gentleman who was so kind to donate to the residency, and it's the I think his name's Kipler. I could be wrong, but Kipler Electro Acoustic Residency.
Oh wow!
Kier.
Oh, that's in the they have like the 10-point. Is it 10-point studio?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it's a fantastic electro acoustic program, and I mean, the facilities are great, and then just the faculty, and of course Eleni, and just all the people that would come from around the world who were engaged in electronic music. It was great. In my master's program, it was really great to have a very focused program on electronic music as a thing, because in undergrad we could do lots of different things, but really having a hyper focus on electronic music, I think that's a lot of of the music I write now. Like I was just saying, when I'm writing acoustic music now, I'm just leaving spaces for electronic stuff that I'd hope to put in later. And I'm very hesitant to be like, well, I don't want to overscore it, because I want to leave some room in the arrangement for messing around on the computer.
Right. Yeah. That D major chord has to come out at some point.
Yeah. Well, but it's a D major chord with something going on sonically behind it, something breaking down, some type of distortion. And I mean, punk music, it's the D major chord, but it's so distorted, or it's so affected that it resonates in a very different way. Yeah,
totally. One thing I want to mention real quick, I think we'll cut it off in a moment. Yeah, we've been going for an hour and a half.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Did I beat Alan's time?
Alan was It was a little over 2 hours.
Oh, I can't do that. I can't. No one can beat Alan. No one can beat it.
My one buddy Corey, actually, we went for over 3 hours the one time.
3 hours. Wow.
Yeah, I think it was like 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Did you guys take like a lunch break or?
There were 2 breaks, I think.
2 breaks.
I think there was 1 or 2 breaks, but very brief.
Yeah.
But one thing, when you were mentioning your technique of windowing, and it's so funny because it made me think about one of the things that has helped me so much studying with Eleni was she showed me this thing where once you write a version of your piece and you have it from beginning to end, she would what's that?
Conduct it.
Well, not that, but she would take like the actual, this is one of my pieces, she would take the actual paper, start cutting up the sections with scissors, and then move it around and just look at it and see what it looks like by placing it in different spots. So now it's like what was the ending might be in the middle or something, or like, well, what would happen if that happens? Or maybe it's not, the ending's now the middle, but it starts in the middle as a little like teaser, you know?
Is that was that written music, so like notes on a page, or was that like the audio files, or what was she
it was
moving around?
It was written music.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and she gave me this idea, which I have right here next to me, colored pencils.
Yes.
Whenever I write a piece of music, and like using colored pencils to like codify, like, I don't know, oh, here's that swell that this piece does. So whenever that swell happens, that's in blue. And then whenever I do this microtonal thing, that's in red. And then so you can visually see, without having to really think about the music, oh, that thing happens here, but it never happens again. Right. I should probably bring that back, because that is really, you know, like.
Right. And I think that's great, because then if you're visually looking, you're looking at all these different colors and shapes, and you're only seeing that blue line once. And so maybe you're like, well, should it only, because sometimes things could only happen once, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great technique.
You made me think about it when you had mentioned windowing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's more about like just taking very, very small bits, and then, you know, through repetition and stretching, you know, building them into something bigger. But a lot of great stuff from lessons with Eleni and or Dr. L, as we called her in grad program, and a lot of interesting ideas. And you know, I was talking about those voices that I hear, and definitely hers is a voice that I hear. And there's some things, you know, where I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that anymore, or I don't, you know, there's some things I don't listen to, but there's a lot of things in there that, you know, I'm like, where do I go next? And I hear that voice. So I think that's the really positive part about teachers and what they can do for us, is they can be sort of when we do start to second guess, and when we do start to get sort of stuck, we can kind of go back to some of the mantras and some of the things that they give us, and keep moving. You know, even if it's just like, figure it out at the end, like get a draft done, like get a draft to me if I do, you know. I feel like working on my thesis with Eleni, it was very much like the deadline's coming, so have something for this deadline. And so I often hear that voice, you know, just telling me to be like, all right, deadline's coming. Even if there is no deadline, there's always a deadline, but well, that doesn't matter right now. It needs to be done by Friday, so make a decision.
That's great. Well, I got to say too, that might be a good spot to even leave off the podcast.
That'd be great.
Before we end it here though, but where can people find you? Do you have any projects coming up that you'd like to plug? Or you mentioned your album, right? Ambient Works.
Right. Yeah. So it came out in May, and it's available anywhere. It's available on Bandcamp. It's available anywhere where music is streaming. You can also buy a copy of the CD on Amazon. It's Doug Bielmeier, Ambient Works, and it's on Albany Records. And it came out in May. If you want to find out any other information about me, you can just check out dougbielmeier.com. That's DOUGBIELMEIER.com. That has links to a lot of great stuff. I'm also on all the socials. I'm not throwing cheese on children or myself on those socials, but I do have stuff that I'm trying to engage you with anyways. And that's just, they're all at Doug Bielmeier, either at Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. No cheese. No cheese.
No cheese. Not yet. All D major.
Yes. Oh, yep. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, Doug, thanks for being on the podcast, man. This is a really fun conversation.
Absolutely, Adam. And hopefully I'm going to start taping for the next season of The Process. So if you have some time, I'd love to. It's usually just an hour conversation. Maybe I could have you on that. I think that would be great.
Absolutely. I'd be honored to be on the podcast. Yeah.